Yeah, I'm rolling.
Okay, you rolling, Stephen?
I am.
Okay. Hi, good morning, and welcome to this, the EnduRow Rowing Challenge Talking Heads. And my name is Cass. I'm the CEO and founder of OurSecretLab, and we are working creatively with the truly inspirational Stephen Dowd. Good morning, Stephen.
Hi, Cass. Thanks for having me.
I think we'll get onto the challenge, which is obviously the meat of this subject, ongoing. But perhaps let's start at the beginning. Perhaps just introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the details of your story and how it's led you to this point.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Stephen Dowd. I am an everyman, really, I guess is probably the easiest way to say it. I'm a dad, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague. I've had a great job in the city. I was working for many years and have had some interesting things happen to me over recent times, which I've been able to use to positive effect.
So just tell us a little bit more about that. When you say you had a job in the city, what did you do?
So I used to run recruitment for a very large investment management business. It was called BNY Mellon, and I used to look after their investment management recruitment across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and even some of the APAC region as well, so ex-US really. Based here in London and running a small team, looking after recruitment from top to bottom of the investment management business.
Okay, and then, starting the story that's brought us together, I'm assuming you were a keen cyclist.
I was to a degree, yeah, it's funny. I had a BMX as a kid. I used to bang around on that all the time. I used to love a bit of cycling. And then I found a job in the city. So you end up in that classic situation where you have no time to do anything other than work a lot of the time. But one of the guys on my team had suggested to me that as a keen cyclist himself, he really fancied doing the Ride London challenge, which was like a 100-mile bike ride. It's a charity bike ride. They close down all the main scenes in London. You go around the major landmarks, up into the Surrey Hills and back again. And so I did what self-respecting boys did when I agreed and went out and bought the most expensive carbon fibre bike I could find, colour-coded my helmet to my shoes, all the important stuff, and set about a bit of training for Ride London in 2016.
So you've picked up the sport. You've obviously bought the gear. That's the most important thing. Your carbon bike is barely UCI legal. What then happened in terms of 2016 really being, a real kind of event horizon for you and, your family?
Yeah, so 2016 was July 2016 was a month that was bad news for us. So I was training on my way down to my friend's house. We cycled into work, it's about a 10-mile commute, and I went down to Woolwich in London where he lives on the way to Blackfriars. And this particular day in early June, beautiful morning, 6:30 in the morning, nothing wrong with it in any way. Unfortunately, I didn't get there. I hit a barrier I didn't see, and as I went over the top of that barrier, I landed on my beautiful colour-coded helmet, which saved me from a brain injury, but unfortunately didn't save me from breaking my neck. And you have 7 bones in your neck. Mine was literally between the third and the fourth, so it couldn't be more in the middle of my neck, which left me immediately paralysed there and then.
Can you remember anything like that? I'm not, look, despite my narcissistic tendencies, I'm not comparing my worst bike injury with yours. But I did the Trois Cinglette where you climb, Mont Ventoux 3 times. Well, I climbed it 3 times, but only managed to come down twice. So I was coming down, motorcycle on the wrong side of the road, went off at about 45 mile an hour and hit a tree stump. And for about 2 years afterwards, when I closed my eyes, I remember the last second of that and hitting that tree like nothing that's ever happened to me. And it was really quite visceral, and I would go, what was it like for you in terms of your memory of that moment, considering how serious it was for you?
Yeah, it was interesting actually, because although I lost everything below the neck immediately, what I didn't lose was consciousness. So all the way through this, I was wide awake, and you can imagine how intensely scary that moment is. Actually, the initial impact, I remember clearly, after having done a shed load of PTSD stuff with it since, but the initial impact was my face, particularly my left cheek, smashed into the ground. And as I hit the ground, I could feel like being punched in the face, probably very similar to the experience you had. It's that kind of, that shock, and kind of stunned me, like Tweety Bird kind of stars around your head sort of thing. And I reached up to touch my face and go, oh, Christ, that hurts. And only as I reached up, nothing happened. and I didn't get my hand to my face. And then you can imagine at that point, I was like, oh my God, that's not right. So I tried again. Nothing.
Oh, that must have been quite simply extraordinary in the real sense of the word.
Oh my word, it was terrifying.
Who were you with?
I was on my own. It was 6:30 in the morning. I was on my way to meet a friend. I was actually very close to the window where we were going to meet, and I never like to be late, and neither does he. So the fact that I smashed into this barrier just minutes before we were due to meet, and I'm not joking, I was 100 yards from his house. I mean, I was so close. And he came out to find out where I was, because we were due to do this commute. So I was found by a couple of runners immediately that happened to be nearby. But they were probably, a couple of hundred metres away. So purely by chance. And then they were able to help me phone the ambulance, that sort of thing. Phone my wife, leave a message for her, which she still has on her voicemail today. And then my friend Dan came out to find me and find where I was. And obviously he found me on the ground as well. And there I was, bent over, bum in the air, very unseemly. I had my backpack riding on the back of my neck as I was arms out to the sides, just flat on the ground. And both of them, when they found me, both of them thought they'd found a dead body. Right? I wasn't moving in any way. It was a really scary time.
Okay, so, I mean, that's, just extraordinary in terms of, I think it's always interesting, and we'll get onto that development in terms of some of the things that you've done, learning the lessons, not necessarily specifically of the moment of impact, but the impact that it's had ongoing and how you've taken that positively forwards is, that you go from taking everything for granted to being unable to touch your face is the most extreme journey, apart from potentially losing your eyesight, that I can possibly imagine, because the ability to move freely, to scratch your face, to pick up a pencil, to send a text message, no one, I would imagine, says a little prayer of gratitude for those basic things until something like this happens.
No, you're very right. I mean, I often say to people, you don't know how strong you are until it's your only option, but you also don't realise how grateful you can be until those very small things are no longer available. And then immediately you're reflecting back on, oh my God, I wish I could do this tiny thing, this very basic thing. These things that we do so often in our life, we learn them as kids and we grow up into adults, and you can't think about every single movement or sensation or noise or whatever that you might come across. But when you're in a position where those things are not available to you, they become very loud and very clear that they're not there. And so, gratitude is a massive thing now, particularly, that I've been able to get some of that back.
And it's interesting because I think we spoke briefly about it when we met for the first time sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago, was that, a shared newfound love of mindfulness, and the bedrock of that being very much about gratitude for things that, unless something like this happens, you would just let, pass you by.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think we can all work well with the element of gratitude. I was just talking about it to somebody recently. You don't need to have gone through an extreme situation or have a significant challenge facing you in order to be grateful for the things that you do have. I very much spent 15-hour days and best part of 20 years working in the city, and I massively overvalued what I didn't have. It was all about bigger cars, bigger houses, promotions, more money, holidays, all the stuff. That was always things that you didn't have, as opposed to actually valuing what you did. So I overvalued what I didn't have and I undervalued what I did, essentially. And I was like introducing myself to my wife on a weekend. It's just insane. Or a couple of times I'd slide into bed next to her when I came in crazy late after working in the office, and then get out of bed and move back to the office before she's even awake again. Do a whole 48 hours of sleeping next to one another and never actually having spoken. Insane. So I never want to go back there again. That definitely, the injury that I had definitely put my priorities into perspective. Life changed, not just physically, but just wholesale.
Well, I mean, look, I think it's a little bit too early in this conversation and attaching our relationship to talk about silver linings and dark clouds. But let's talk about, the initial part of, from that shock, that shocking moment, quite literally, to, the early part, that journey to the hospital, the realization of the seriousness. When did somebody first look at you who'd spent sort of 10 or 15 years knowing what they were talking about and wearing a white lab coat tell you that this was very, very serious and could ongoing be, forever?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a guy called Matt. And Matt sat me down as he was working with my consultant. And once I'd been through hospital, they put me through the MRIs, the X-rays, all the stuff that you would anticipate you would go through in a serious injury like that. Because what I'd done effectively is dislocate my neck, and I'd crushed and stretched my spinal cord. Now, crucially, what I didn't do was cut my spinal cord in terms of like sever it, because the prognosis for that is very bleak indeed. That's called a complete injury, whereas mine's what's called an incomplete injury. So it's impact damage, it's a lot of pressure and bruising and all that sort of stuff that can, if left untreated, can become a complete injury. But if they can get to it early enough, then they can save some of that nervous tissue, and that as little as 10% can be the difference between walking and not walking. I mean, it's you're talking fine margins. So I found myself at hospital, going through the MRIs, going through the X-rays, laying there in bed, doped up to the eyeballs and whatever it was they were giving me. And Matt said to me, "Steve, your injury is so devastating, we don't know what you're going to get back. We'll be honest that you might spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair, driving around with your mouth." That was the prognosis potentially. It's not a guarantee. You may make a level of recovery, but we obviously can't promise anything at this stage. However, we are running a clinical intervention at the moment, like a clinical research trial. And if you wanted to be involved in that, then you would be eligible. It was funded by a group called Wings for Life. They're a spinal cord injury foundation that I'd never heard of. And but their raison d'etre was to find a cure for spinal cord injury. So what they were looking to do is fund experimental research trials like this very one that was happening at St George's in London. So I metaphorically reached out both hands and took that option. My wife and I had a very honest conversation and said that if I can't make this better, if I can't improve, and if my prognosis really is going to be me driving around a power chair with my mouth forever, the caveat being some people live very good lives like that, by the way, and this is a very personal choice. But for me, I didn't want that for me. And I didn't want that for Helen. I didn't want her to be my kind of dependency for another 40 years. That wasn't on the cards. She didn't sign up to that, and she didn't need that. So we had a very honest conversation and said, if that is going to be the outcome, then I'll book a one-way ticket to Switzerland and we'll call it a day. It was pretty dark.
Let me just pause you there, because that's in terms of someone's personal life, even in the face of this horrendous injury. That's really quite an extraordinary statement, and in quite an extraordinary way to deal with it, in terms of being able to have that kind of level of openness and transparency about what you want, not only for yourself in the darkest of hours, but also your expectations for your partner and all the rest of it, just without harping on it. But what was that like? Did you just know, you were like, listen, look, if this doesn't get fixed, that's me out?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you're totally right. It's a very dark conversation. It's a very dark outcome if you do follow through on that decision. The decision itself was surprisingly not as hard to reach as you might think, because I was lying there with nothing below the neck. My wife was in tatters because her whole world had changed as well. Spinal cord injury in this case, but anybody's major event doesn't just affect that one individual, it affects all of those people around you, from the closest to sometimes the furthest away from you. I mean, my injury has affected people I don't even know. So it was very important for us to have a conversation around what the future would look like. And if both of us were up for that, both of us very quickly came to the conclusion that actually that would be a changed life that we weren't prepared to live. And therefore the decision makes itself at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and how did that develop in terms of, I mean, did you feel that because of your certainty about what you considered unacceptable in terms of quality of life, or a lack of quality of life for your baseline, did that then precipitate your decision to be involved in the trial, or the trial came along and you thought, oh, this is something that I would do anyway?
Yeah, the conversation was had very swiftly between one another, actually. So Helen and I had the news about what the prognosis might be, that it wasn't impossible that I might make some level of recovery, but it was unlikely. And so that led on to our conversation about what next for us. However, the conversation with the experimental trial was within an hour of that conversation being had. So they were very close together. So hence why we have basically agreed that, well, with Switzerland as a backstop, Switzerland's always there. If we need to go to Switzerland, then we can. Before we do, we have this opportunity. And now they said to us, we can't promise we can make it any better, but we know we can't make it any worse. So that gave me the opportunity to say, it's only upside or there's Switzerland. So let's look at that. So we took an opportunity with both hands, as I say, and I literally say we took the opportunity because Helen and I both agreed together that that would be the potential outcome, the potential future that would have the most, the best chance of me making a level of recovery for both of us. So we had to make that choice together.
Okay, so let's talk about, so now, you've had this horrendous injury. You're well aware of the, the potential long-term, issue in terms of what you're going to be able to do. And now the trial begins. What is the nature of the trial? How did the Wings for Life team get involved, and how did they explain it to you? And what were the initial phases of it like?
Cool. So Wings for Life are not at the hospital. They are a funding foundation. So effectively, they take on board a number of projects all around the world. They look at where those projects are going and what the likelihood is of finding a cure through those. And they could be everything from stem cell research through to pressure studies like the one that I had, and a number of different ones. So they happen to fund 50 people for the experimental intervention that I had. So whilst I was in hospital, I met with my consultant, a guy called Dr. Papadopoulos, who was running, Marios Papadopoulos, who was running that particular trial. And I was number, 45 through that process. So yeah, they'd said to us, if you want to get involved, then you can. We signed up. I literally physically had to sign the document, which is ridiculous. I had no hands and no arms and nothing, but someone held my hand with a pen in it because you physically have to sign it in this country. So I made my mark. And then within 24 hours, I was in and out of surgery and intensive care. But the nature of that surgery, if that's the question, was you're asking specifically?
Yeah, so what was the specific nature of the trial? Not knowing at all whether it was, pharmaceutical, surgical, medical, combination of all three. How long did it take? How long was that first moment where you were like, okay, so I can't walk yet, but I can move my fingers, and that felt like magic in itself.
Yeah, so it was a combination of all of those things. So effectively, mine was a pressure study. So what happens with the spinal cord, it's surrounded by a membrane called the dura, which is really, really strong. So armor cabling for your spinal cord, which is fantastic at stopping stuff from the outside getting in, but it's rubbish at stopping stuff from the inside getting out. And that stuff from the inside we're talking about is pressure. So it's bruising, it's inflammation, it's all of that sort of stuff. Where you would normally injure yourself and things would expand, your body would do what it naturally does to take care of that area and remove some of the toxins and the various metabolites that are in that area, and then would come back to normal again. You can't do that in the spinal cord because it's under such high pressure that the walls are not moving. So what they did with me was they put some probes down inside that dura next to the spinal cord to monitor the pressure so that they could tell where it was and to what level it was. And then through medicine, drugs primarily, and through my heart rate as well, they would raise my heart rate very high. And sorry, the other way around. They would raise my heart rate very high. They would raise my blood pressure very high, and they would drop my heart rate very low. So they would manage the two effectively. And that in itself was enough to be able to reduce the bruising really quickly. So where I'd hit the floor, I had this big shiner on my face. That was gone in a space of days. It was insane. You see people carry around this kind of yellowing bruise for weeks and weeks after a big injury like that. Mine was like it never happened, just days later. So if that was what was happening to the outside of my body, imagine what was happening to the inside. And that turned out to be the case. So they were able to manage that bruising enough to be able to save enough nervous tissue for me to be able to start to regain some sensation. And that happened pretty swiftly. So immediately after surgery, I was in and out of surgery in 24 hours from the injury. And then within a couple of days, I started to get hypersensitivity, which is, I can only describe as like being on fire. It was absolutely horrible, literally from my neck down to my waist, down both arms, nothing below the waist. It was like I was having boiling oil poured on me. I mean, it was just so intensely painful just to be. And if anybody touched me in any way, that loving way that nurses come along and kind of stroke your arm and tell you everything's going to be okay, that was enough for me. That was a 10 out of 10 for me. And I was like clinging to the ceiling every time somebody touched me, including my wife and my granddaughter and anybody there. And bearing in mind...
Is that because it's quite literally your body checking in and reminding you, look, this is the pain I've been in, you just couldn't feel it?
I don't think so. I don't think it's about retrospective pain. I'm not entirely sure of the mechanics of it, but certainly when your nerves are my whole body was in a very highly protected phase. It was like every time I moved it, it would flinch. It wasn't me doing it necessarily, but people would touch it and muscles would flinch, and it was really interesting that there was obviously some nervous connection. But yeah, so it was, like I say, it was every time I was touched, it was like being on fire, and I had to be turned every 4 hours. My whole body had to be turned because of bed sores. If you sit in the same place for too long, the tissue of high pressure areas starts to die, and a lot of people in hospital actually suffer with bed sores. I was very lucky. I had a peachy bum for the whole time I was there, not a single bed sore. But yeah, a lot of people that did suffer that actually can put it's very serious actually. It can put your recovery back weeks and weeks, if not months, on some occasions. So I was very lucky, but it meant that I had to have a team of nurses come and turn me. I mean, they were literally, I'm 6'3" and 100 kilos, right? It would take 4 or 5 nurses to turn me every 4 hours, and every time they touched me, it was like being on fire. It was just awful. Totally awful.
Okay, so when we start to see the mechanics of it now, so you have the trial, they perform the surgery, combination of medical technique in terms of raising your blood pressure, lowering your heart rate, and then also the various drugs that you're taking. So you've come through this period of having no feeling below the neck. Then there's some sensibility. Is there any sense of movement, or just the fire from the waist to the neck?
Initially, it was just like being on fire for a while, but then relatively swiftly, it all started with a twitch of my left thumb. That was the first movement I had. It's almost like that scene that you saw in Kill Bill, where she's like focusing on her toe to get herself to move her toe. It was just like that. I was trying and failing 1,000 times a day to try and make something happen, make something move. And from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep, I was desperately trying to move something. And I did. I picked my thumb for that to be the one. So I was just looking at it and I was like just willing it to happen. And then when it did twitch, I was like, oh my God, could you imagine that moment? I was like, was that me?
It must have been incredible.
Oh, it really was. And I didn't know if it was me, because I get these even today, I still have uncontrollable body spasms. So my body will go into like a cramp, effectively, from the neck down for 10 seconds or so, and it's intensely painful. And this was happening right off the bat, right from day one, from the injury. And so when my thumb moved, I wondered if it was me or if it just was another little spasm. And then I did it again and it moved again. And I was like, oh, hello. That was me. And if that's me and I can move my thumb, I'm not going to grow up to be the guy that can move his thumb. No one's got that. No one's that guy. But if I was able to move my thumb, what else can I do? And then that really gave me the impetus to start looking at other parts of my body and really focusing on how I'm going to do it. And it went from a twitch of a thumb to a twitch of a toe to a kneecap coming back online with a little bit of sensation on the inside of my left knee. I remember the day my arse came back online. It literally happened like that. It's really strange. It was just like, oh, hello. And all of a sudden I could feel something. And it was, and it gradually came on piece by piece. It was mostly sensory to start with, and only the movement came on a little later.
So from that time, what's the timeline here? So from the injury to your arse coming back online, what are we talking about?
That was probably the space of about 2 or 3 weeks. It was weeks, not months, which was great. And in fact, I know I then went through a series of these kind of pieces coming back online, and every time they did, we'd celebrate like it was Christmas Day. I mean, every single day we just had another little win. Every day something was changing, something was happening, and it happened for 90 straight days. And I know it happened for 90 days because on day 91 nothing much happened. And I remember it as a day, and we celebrated at the fact that we'd had a little win every day for 90 days. So yeah, it was really important to celebrate every little one of those wins, not just am I walking, am I not walking, that sort of stuff. It was tiny, tiny wins from patches of sensation to tiny movements and twitches. All of them were as important as each other.
Okay, so let's look at that in terms of, so you've had these 90 days. When did you really begin to sort of set yourself challenges, and when did physiotherapy begin, and did those two things sort of happen, concurrently?
So I set myself challenges right from the off. So on day 2, I looked across to my wife, who was sat next to me in intensive care. I had nothing below the neck at this point, and I did have the sensation of fire coming on though. And I said to Helen, "What's 200 days from now?" And she said, "It's December the 22nd. Why's that?" I said, "Give me Christmas Day and I'll be back to normal." And that was my promise to my wife, that I would use as my daily motivation to, like I say, try and fail 1,000 times a day to try and move towards that. And I needed this bold, ambitious goal, this gold medal level goal, that I would then try and take steps towards and just inch towards each and every day. And eventually, kind of cue Rocky montage, as it were, I went through a whole bunch of physio with my trauma team in intensive care, and then when I went into the wards, so I spent 2 months, first of all, in St George's Hospital. I then spent another 2 months in Stanmore, which is a rehabilitation hospital in London, so 4 months in total. And then by day 90, I stood for the first time and started to gingerly take my first steps.
Wow, that must have been just quite extraordinary feeling.
It was, absolutely. I mean, obviously, this is exactly the thing I was practicing for 24 hours a day. So I think rarely do you reach a goal in a big go. You don't kind of go, I can't do it now, I can do it. I think you tend to incrementally do things often. And then you look back at big goals and go, oh yeah, no, I achieved it. But you tend to achieve it 1 footstep at a time. But equally, things in just 90 days, things were moving fast. I was getting little wins every day. I was pulling the stops out every day, working super hard. But it wasn't just about me, right? I mean, I had a team of people around me that were really focused on just seeing what more I could do. I think they weren't used to having somebody who had a goal and had a real 24-hour-a-day dedication to that goal. And because I had this promise to my wife, right, and to myself, that this is the time I need to take to get this right. And they really took it with both hands. All of the guys that I work with said, right, okay, let's see what more we can do. Let's test him in new ways. Let's do different things. So my first 2 months at St George's, particularly, the trauma physio, the trauma occupational therapist, and a number of the team there, including Dr. Papadopoulos and Matt, the first guy that I met when I came in on day 1, were just amazing in terms of pushing me forwards and really testing me.
Yeah, so, okay, so at what stage were you're viewing your exit from hospital, and what kind of movement range did you have at that stage?
So I was looking to leave hospital, the second hospital, after 4 months. I won't lie, I didn't love my second hospital experience. I found a lot of the time there was actually quite energy sapping in many ways, and I really didn't need that. So I only spent 1 weekend actually at that particular hospital. And then every weekend thereafter, I'd smuggle myself out and go and stay at friends' houses or someone else's house just to get some normality. Yeah, so for the second 2 months, I did 7 weekends away. I got out as often as I possibly could. Many times I'd pop around to bars. They were doing a 2-for-1 on margaritas nearby and smuggle some drinks back for the nurses, etc. It was really important to me to have that level of normality. Whereas everybody else, even though I was abnormal in my ability to move, I was still making gains every day. I was moving from sitting in my wheelchair and shuffling around onto Zimmer frames, then using 2 crutches and then 1 crutch. And eventually I was able to take my first unaided steps, which was on one of those weekends actually, at my mum's place. I remember getting out of the car and people worried about setting up ramps to get wheelchairs into the house and out of the house again, a couple of steps leading up to the door. I said, well, why don't I just try and walk it? And everyone looked around and sort of, what? So, well, I've been practicing walking with stuff. Why don't I practice it without stuff? What's the worst that can happen? Fall on my face. But so I did. And in fact, there's a short video of that where you can see me taking those ginger steps down those couple of steps from the front door towards the car on the way back to hospital.
It seems like you've got an incredible visceral memory of all of these kind of elements. That must be quite powerful fuel for sort of what's come next, the challenges, your speaking career as concerns, crisis management. And, I've heard it, you mentioned it a couple of times in terms of breaking, seemingly insurmountable goals down into component parts and then, attacking each of them, in a committed fashion. Can you sort of potentially explain that, that transition, both in terms of your challenges and also in terms of how it's provided you with a new focus and a new career?
Yeah, sure. So my career at the bank was very much still open to me. I'm very thankful to BNY Mellon for keeping that seat open. And I did consider going back into the world of recruitment. Although at that time, I thought, if I'm honest with myself, I'm quite happy to leave behind the big city corporate life. I wasn't going to be able to do it at the pace and speed that I would like to do it at. It's kind of demanded of you in that environment anyway. So I thought rather than go back in as a disabled person and struggle, now might be a great inflection point to do something different. So I did. I set out a series of challenges. I fulfilled the 200 days promise to Helen and carried our Christmas turkey to the table, which was pretty intense. I have seen the video, and I am impressed that as a man who owns, I think, an ugly Gremlins Christmas jumper, your all-white Tesco's effort is truly disgusting. Thank you. As any good Christmas jumper should be, right? Maybe we can get Tesco's to sponsor the video. So I managed to walk our Christmas turkey to the table and fulfill a promise to my wife. That I'd be able to get there. And talking about the visceral attachment to it, I was standing there in the kitchen on my own, just shedding a few little tears to myself to say, I've done this. I could hear my family in the room next door, could feel the weight of this crazy heavy bird I really didn't want to drop. It was far too important. And I just started taking footsteps. This thing that I'd visualised for so long was taking place right there. There I was doing it. It was super intense. But it became more about other people. So I'd been going through a lot of stuff and I'd learned a lot of stuff, but I thought, how can I put that into a position where other people can benefit from that? Everyone's got a 9 out of 10 challenge. Mine was paralysis, but whatever it is for you, that's your 9 out of 10. So how could I help others distill those lessons that I'd learned and be able to put it into a practical toolkit that they could use and take away and use in their own life? Wouldn't necessarily resonate with everyone, but something in there that would help people approach a situation differently, whether it's physically or mentally, then that would be worthwhile doing. So I set it up as a series of challenges. The first one was called 200 Days Challenge, and I promised to the internet, before I told my wife, always a bad idea, never do it in that order, that I was going to get back on the same bike that I fell from. And I was going to cycle the 100 miles that I didn't get to do. I set about a series of training and eventually found myself at Red Bull headquarters taking on that challenge. And in 200 days of training, I was able to cross the finish line of 100 miles. And again, another crazy, intense time, 5 hours a day in physio and everything on the lead up to it. But yeah, managed to achieve something that I hadn't maybe intended to or didn't necessarily believe I could.
Can I just let me just ask you, because there's a nice, there's obviously a very clear parallel between you almost developing, a business side set of mechanics, this toolkit, and then instantly applying them to your own challenges in terms of what you want to achieve, mentally and physically, without sort of giving away, Willy Wonka's recipe for the everlasting gobstopper. Can you give us perhaps your top 5, top 6, if it's easy to sort of corral them into, simple components?
So I turned it into 9 simple components. I distilled it down to the word challenge. And each one of those letters of the word challenge, behind each one of them has a tool. And that tool was something that I thought, if I could distill this down and let somebody have access to that, what would be different about what I'd done and how could I translate that across to them? So if you just walk through those 9 quickly, The C is choose to respond effectively. You may not necessarily control the situation, but you do control your response to it. So choose to respond effectively is the first. The H is help others help you. No one's an island. You don't do it on your own. Often your problem is also other people's problems. So they want to be a part of that solution because it helps them too. The A is accept the situation objectively. Understand where you are, what it is, what it's not. And then you can make a really clear plan as to what you do from there, rather than lamenting what you've lost historically. The first L was learn through trial and error. So if you're not trying hard enough, if you're not failing often enough, you're not trying hard enough effectively. So be Darwinian about it. Try new things, try often, fail often, evaluate and keep what works, bin what doesn't. The second L is leverage all of your resources. So whether they be time or people or funds, money, know what you have and where you have it so that you can practice that beforehand and not worry about it when it actually happens. You need to, you know where that stuff is already. The E is engage, be a part of your process. Get in the driver's seat. So many people, and understandably so, check out because it's just too much for them. But if you can get yourself into the driver's seat, your prognosis and your achievements are that much more likely to happen. The N is never quit. Different to stopping. Stopping, if you've done proper evaluation and you understand that it's correct to not do the thing you've been doing, then to stop is the right answer. But not to quit. Don't quit when it gets hard. A lot of people do that. They do the hard yards and then they don't cross the line at the end. The G is grow. So once you've set your goals, you have your bold, ambitious goals, you have your little daily wins, your tiny goals, maybe multiple goals in a day. As soon as you've hit that goal, set a new goal, move on, keep stepping forwards, keep growing, keep developing. And then the final E is ease up. You won't get it right every time. You won't be able to bring your A game every day. You won't always be 100%. I'm certainly not. But if you can win and you can win more regularly than you lose, then that's a good thing. You're going in the right direction. So when you're not having those great days, go easy on yourself.
So, taking these mechanics, which were born out of the challenges, and I know that we've taken up a lot of your time today already, and I promised that we would keep it reasonably tight. Let's, transition just quickly to EnduRow, how you've discovered rowing, why you felt that this was something that potentially was underdeveloped in terms of your vision for it, in terms of what you think is possible.
Absolutely. So I found myself at the top of the stairs after one of my challenges. The Isolation Everest Challenge saw me become the first tetraplegic to virtually summit Everest on my stairs at home over lockdown, which was a crazy period in itself. But whilst I was at the top of those stairs, I was talking to a journalist, and that journalist said to me, "So well done on what you've done, what next?" And my response to that was, I really fancy an indoor rowing challenge. I'm not a rower, but then I wasn't a mountain climber or a cyclist or any of the other things that I've done through the other challenges. That doesn't mean to say I can't do that thing, right? So this could be a great opportunity to do a static sport using the ergo, the indoor rowing machine. But I had no idea what that would look like. Now the backdrop was COVID, right? Where everyone's suffering with fear and anxiety and isolation. Everyone from corner to corner of the world. So I thought, how can we do something that brings everyone everywhere together at the same moment in time through rowing? So that's what effectively is the EnduRow Challenge in a nutshell. So if I would describe it, it's a 4-hour row. It's going to happen simultaneously around the world, 3 p.m. UK time on February the 6th, 2021. And we're going to have everyone everywhere pulling together, fundraising for spinal cord injury research. This will be done either in groups, we're calling them macros and crew rows, or it'll be done at home on your own. They're solo rows done in a micro environment, or any combination of those. So everyone everywhere can get involved, whether you're able-bodied, adapted, men, women and kids. Really is everyone everywhere pulling together. Really looking forward to doing that really and seeing where we can go. The goal is to have 10,000 people on rowing machines all around the world, raising best part of £1 million.
And also, from that perspective, it is, really bold. But I think one of the, the things that I found particularly inspiring about when we first met was that you said that the rowing community has just been incredible in terms of, affording you an insight into, just how powerful, a sport in terms of connecting. Just tell me a little bit about that.
You're totally right. I was genuinely surprised that the rowing community was as welcoming as it has been. Yeah, my financial services background has always been very. It's always dubious. People are always kind of questioning why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing it. Not the case in rowing. Yeah, everyone I've spoken to have been amazing. My experience of rowing previously was only very superficial, in as much as it was always kind of posh school kids, posh schools. It was an inaccessible sport, so I expected there to be a lot of division, a lot of protection. But it's been great speaking to everyone from national governing bodies like British Rowing and Rowing Australia and World Rowing, even the international body, through to schools and clubs and gyms, and everyone who has a touch point with rowing. They've all been super engaged and really want to help. And every time I speak to them, they say, this is quite different. EnduRow Challenge is not the normal kind of race environment. And because it brings everyone everywhere together, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, this is the event for them. And it's a great galvanizer. Then it's different, and people have really thrown their arms around it and given me a ton of support to get it off the ground.
Well, look, as I said, we've been particularly inspired. Obviously, we're now working with you, to help you, push EnduRow Challenge as much as we can. What would you consider to be, a kind of successful event? How would you like to see the next 3 months go?
This is an easy question. Yeah, I need to get as many people on rowing machines as I can possibly get. I'm aiming to get 10,000. I'm aiming to have those people raise an average of £100 each. That's £1 million in total. And if we can get, if you've not signed up already, get yourself over to EnduRowChallenge.com. You can sign up, but give yourself a reason to get together with the rest of the world, a global community where we can all pull together and we can all do something constructive at a time where good news is in short supply. So let's do something together. Let's do something meaningful. And again, on February the 6th at 3 p.m. UK time, everyone everywhere can pull together in EnduRow Challenge. We're raising money for spinal cord injury research. And so let's not lose sight of that. It means that at the moment we don't have a cure, but we can, and we can in our own lifetimes. And somebody somewhere is going to raise that £1 extra that will be the difference between not having a cure and having a cure. So maybe that could be you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a real Grinch, but we actually own a rowing machine, and the children have heard about the challenge and have now insisted that we row all 4 hours. I've already designated myself as the F&B manager. So the guys will row and I will occasionally say, do you want a cup of tea?
That would be amazing. F&B is very important. Get everybody together, everyone around the rower, everyone around the idea of why we're doing this. And again, global community, making sure that we're raising as much money and awareness for spinal cord injury research as we can. Obviously, don't do anything stupid. If you're a young kid, understand what you can and can't do. If you are the parent or guardian of kids, then obviously you've got to take advantage of an opportunity, but do it in a safe way. We absolutely underline that. But everybody everywhere here can be having some great fun, raising some fantastic money, and doing something really meaningful for spinal cord injury research.
Well, Stephen, we've definitely been inspired by your kind of desire to set goals and to set challenges and then go beyond them. And it's our hope that EnduRow Challenge is just the next sort of box for you to tick.
Thank you very much, Cass. I really appreciate everything you and the guys are doing.
No worries. Thanks very much, Stephen. Have a great weekend. The very, very best of luck. www.EnduRowChallenge.com. Big thank you to Stephen Dowd. And goodbye.